training. Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.
All right, good afternoon, Team Krulak community. My name is Major Ian Brown. I'm the Operations Officer at the Brute Krulak Center for Innovation and Creativity. And on behalf of Marine Corps University, the Marine Corps University Foundation, and the Krulak Center, welcome back to the Brutecast, our series designed to connect the worlds of the warfighter and PME with the best in innovative and creative thought. Before we begin, please remember that all opinions expressed here are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Krulak Center, Marine Corps University, the United States Marine Corps, or any other agency of the U.S. government. We will also be recording this webcast for the benefit of those in our community of interest who cannot join us today. So we ask that you be mindful of keeping your microphones muted to avoid disrupting the presentation, as well as keep your webcams off to help us stream smoothly. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. So if you have a question, just type it into the group chat and we'll facilitate and get to as many as we can after Professor Hess concludes his introduction. So with that, I'm pleased to turn things over to Ms. Valerie Jackson, Director of the Krulak Center, who will introduce today's speaker.
Thanks, Ian. Today we are very excited to welcome Professor Edward D. Hess to the Brutecast. He's a Professor of Business Administration, Batten Faculty Fellow, and Batten Executive in Residence at the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia. Professor Hess has spent more than 20 years in the business world as a senior executive at Warburg Paribas Becker, Betcher & Company, the Robert M. Bass Group, and Arthur Andersen. He joined academia in 2002 as an adjunct professor of organization and management at the Goizeta School of Business at Emory University, where he was the founder and executive director of the Values-Based Leadership Institute. In 2007, he joined the faculty of the Darden Graduate School of Business. He is the author of 13 books and over 150 articles dealing with optimizing individual and organizational performance. His work has been featured in more than 400 leading global media publications. His book, Humility is the New Smart, was a bestseller, and his new book, Hyperlearning, How to Adapt to the Speed of Change, was recently published on September 1st. We're very pleased to welcome Professor Hess. Ed, over to you.
Being with you. And hello, everybody. I'd like to spend a few moments with you sort of explaining my mental model, if you will, as to where we are as in the world vis-a-vis learning, vis-a-vis innovation, and introduce you, if you will, to why I believe humility is so important going forward as a behavior and as a mindset, but even in addition, talk about the big picture of how we optimize human performance in the digital age. As everybody knows, technology is going to transform how we live and how we do our jobs. It's already doing that. But the converging technologies that are advancing now at such a pace is going to fundamentally change it even more than we've experienced. It's going to increase the speed of change. It's going to require faster responses. It's going to basically make the quality of decision making, the quality of adaptation, and the quality of hyperlearning key factors in success in your world, in the commercial world, in the social world. Human beings will add value by doing what the technology can't do well. Technology can't think in nonlinear ways. So we are going to have to think differently than the technology. Technology will know more than we know. It will know far more than we know, because it not only will know more, it can access it faster, and it can access it really perfectly, and it can upgrade its technology at the speed of change. We can't do that. So we have to excel at thinking in ways differently than the technology, and that's innovation, that's creativity, that's going into the unknown and figuring things out, and that's and emergent thinking, sense making, which is the highest level of human thinking. We have to excel at working in volatile, uncertain, ambiguous environments. We have to excel, if you will, in making judgments that are moral choices in your field, in your profession, judgments about the use of force and the magnitude of force. Humans will have to see what the algorithms don't see. The problem is we human beings are suboptimal learners. We're suboptimal adapters. We are wired that way. We go out in the world seeking confirmation of what we believe, affirmation of our egos, and cohesiveness of our mental models. We go out in the world and we see what we believe. Well, in fast-changing environments, and I suggest to you in your field, technology, whether you want to call it digital warriors, the fact is technology is going to be embedded, all right, into robots, but also into human beings in such a way that the speed at which that people are going to have to make judgments, to make decisions, it's going to be such that we have to be able to bring to the table our best self, which means we have to bring to the table a person that's seeking confirmation, that's not seeking affirmation, that's not seeking to keep their stories cohesive. Because otherwise we can't adapt and respond to a new reality which we don't usually see. How is this going to happen? Most of the time it's going to happen in small teams. No one can think at their highest levels by themselves. Collective intelligence is far greater than soul intelligence. Making that happen requires people to come to the table in a special way, and I call it inner peace. And the first part of inner peace is a quiet ego. The second part is a quiet mind. The third part is being in control of your body. And the fourth part, if you will, is coming with a positive, emotional, can-do attitude. Everyone, I'm sure, listening does PT every morning. To prepare ourselves to excel in the digital age, all of us are going to have to do not only PT, but MT, mind training, and HT, heart training. We're also going to have to use different types of learning techniques, virtual reality, and video games. And I know you already use video games, but video games even at a higher level. Why? Because we've got to basically rewire ourselves. We've got to basically seek novelty, seek exploration, seek discovery, not seek confirmation, affirmation, and cohesiveness. We've got to see better what we can't see now. We've got to actively look for what's unusual, what's disconfirming. We've got to ask questions to lead to exploration and discovery. We've got to defer judgments, all right, so that we can explore. We've got to embrace differences. We've got to have a special kind of conversations, making meaning conversations, high quality making meaning conversations. In high quality making meaning conversations, and during those conversations, everyone should have the ability to speak up and speak honestly, but everyone has to basically tamp down their ego. Ego and fear are the two biggest inhibitors of learning. And the way to tamp down ego is to have a quiet ego. And that's what humility is. All right? Humility is not being meek. All right? Humility is not thinking less of oneself. Humility is having an accurate view of what you know and what you don't know and your capabilities. Humility is a mindset that allows me to be open to people having different views and allows me to explore it. Humility allows me to listen to people with an open mind and to basically explore and make sure I understand what they're saying before I tell them what I think. Humility makes us less, we define ourselves less by what we know and more by the quality of our thinking, listening, relating, and collaborating. So the world we're going into is going to move so fast. We humans are going to have to be able to adapt and upgrade what we believe is how the world works, just like you upgrade your devices. And in order to do that, we have to retrain ourselves. We have to overcome our natural way of being. We have to overcome our focus of defining ourselves by what we know and our emotional defensiveness to be reactive, hyper-reactive when we're challenged. And so we're talking about human change. We're talking about human development. We're talking about having a new mindset, a mindset of new smart, which I talked about the first principle. I don't define myself by what I know or how much I know. And the reason I don't do that anymore is I can't compete against the technology and the smart machines. I define myself by the quality of my thinking, listening, and collaborating. My mental models are not reality. They're only my generalized source of words. I'm not my ideas, and I must decouple my beliefs, not my values, from my ego. I must be open-minded and treat my beliefs, again, not my values, as hypothesis to be tested and subject to modification. And I must come to the table with a curious mind, an open mind. I must bring my full self to the table and be fully present. I must be very mindful. I've got to be able to relate emotionally with people, because emotions is what makes the difference between collective intelligence and soul intelligence. And by collective intelligence, I mean the intelligence of the group. Nobody can achieve success in the world we're going into, and even this world, by themselves. You need others, I need others. And we have to be the type of people that others feel comfortable being with and comfortable sharing their inner selves and their best thoughts and also their questions and their, if you will, things they're concerned about that you may think makes them look stupid or not smart. Collective intelligence is highly dependent on people trusting each other and positive emotions. And that is gained, if you will, by behaving in ways that earn that trust. Doesn't mean you won't have hierarchy. It doesn't mean it's not going to be command and control in certain situations. But what it does mean is that people have to be comfortable to speak up and speak out with respect, psychological safety. We should be curious. Curious people are good learners. We should not be scared of uncertainty. We should have a methodology to go into uncertainty and to figure things out. And I come back to the first step in the journey. We have to take ownership of what's going on inside of us, and we have to take ownership of our behaviors. We have to take ownership of how we think, ownership of our emotions. How-to skills are going to be mission critical. How people behave is mission critical. It's the little behaviors that count a lot. And most of us haven't been trained, if you will, from a behavioral perspective. The world that I see and the world that I believe is coming is going to require us to upgrade ourselves. It's going to require us to embrace a new way of communicating, a new way of working, a new way that's behavioral based and emotionally based. The big differentiator between human beings and smart robots is going to be emotions. And I come back to something I said in the beginning. The highest level of human thinking is emergent thinking. Emergent thinking is basically when our subconscious and our conscious minds are interacting, and we are at a state of mind and a state of emotions that it just comes up. It's a little bit, I'm sure everybody here has been in a state of flow before. Athletes, musicians, artists, warriors have been in a state of flow. And you know what that feels like. You're sort of all in. Time flies by. Like everything in your body is invested in what you're doing. And in the world we're going into, the goal is going to be collective flow. For teams to be in collective flow. And collective flow applies whether you're basically sitting in the conference room trying to make decisions, working on creative or innovation, new ways to basically do what you do, and collective flow applies when people are on missions. And when you're in collective flow, things emerge from you. And that is coming from you from not only your conscious mind, but your unconscious mind. And people feel that way and are all in. And that's when the highest level thinking occurs, that's where the highest level adaptation occurs. That's that's called sense making. And I suggest to you that the professional of the future, the successful people are going to be the people that basically not only do physical training, but do mind training, heart training, which is emotions, so that they come to the table and can control what's going on inside of themselves in such a way that they can basically overcome our current wiring of seeking confirmation, affirmation, and cohesiveness, which means steadiness, which means not liking change, means wanting everything to be the way it was. It's not going to be the way it was in the world we're going into because of the pace of change and because of technology. So what's the model? We need a new mindset, and it starts out with humility and new smart. We need to focus on behaviors and really improve how we basically engage with the world and how we relate to other people and connect. We need to basically focus on training ourselves, not only our physical self and our courageous self, but our emotional self and our mind. Our minds wander about 50% of the time. People who have trained their mind can basically, let's just take an office day, can go from meeting to meeting to meeting and be 100% present in every conversation, every meeting, without a wandering mind, without thinking about something different than what the speaker is thinking about, without making up their answer to the question while the person is talking, without judging the person and critiquing the person, without thinking about the last meeting or thinking about the next meeting. And this is all based in neuroscience. This is all real. This is not make-believe. That's where I believe the professionals of the future, whether it's in the business world or whether it's in the military, that's where we as human beings need to get to. Why don't I stop there and open it up for questions, comments?
Okay, great. Professor Hess, thank you so much, Ed, for that. I think you've really gotten our creative juices flowing with that. So I'll go ahead and start with some questions, and then for everyone on the line here, if you have a question, just go ahead and type it in the chat so I know you have it, and then if you're able to, I'll go ahead and ask you to ask your question when I get to it, and I'll prompt you for that. So the first one I'll throw at you is, largely Marine audience or those that are involved with Marines or military, we need to both be and appear competent. How can you explain how humility and self-confidence interplay with each other?
Well, I think a person that has humility can come across as very competent, because a competent person has learned, if you will, how to be successful and how to figure things out, how to stay abreast, how to not make mistakes, how to make the best decisions. And that requires getting the right information and asking the right questions. And that requires having the right people at the table and getting different viewpoints, because a competent person understands that we are limited by our mental models, and our mental models basically are limited by our background, our training, and in some parts by our gender. And so it's culture and environment and training. And so a competent person, humility is a competence that a competent person needs, because humility enables open-mindedness. It enables innovation, creativity. It enables the highest level of critical thinking, because it allows me to basically be very comfortable with the fact that I don't know everything. And that shouldn't be embarrassing to anybody, because there's no human being that ignorance, the magnitude of our ignorance far exceeds the magnitude of what we know. And when you're in an environment that change is going to be happening, when you're in an environment where human beings are augmenting technology or vice versa, and you're dealing with that when basically on missions, training how to do that means I've got to be open. I've got to basically accept the fact that it's the quality of my thinking and the quality of my listening and the quality of my collaborating and the quality of my relating with people that enables them to also perform at their highest levels, but enables us as a group to perform at the highest levels. So I think it comes down to how you define competence. All right. If you define competence as I know everything, yeah, you got a problem. The fact of the matter is that's a bad definition of competence in the world that we're in.
Great, thank you. I'll ask him one more, and then I'll go to the chat. So, how can higher education, especially higher military education, encourage open-mindedness and the resultant creativity, while we're still sort of trapped in this industrial age model of having to have competition and rank people and demonstrate performance and, those that excel over others in this type of environment? So anything practical for us at Marine Corps University and other military PME organizations?
Well, I suggest the following. All right, I suggest the following. I think let's sit back and just all of us on the line just brainstorm for a moment. All right, we're going to have rank, and rank serves a good purpose. So we're not looking at basically disturbing that. What we're looking at, what kind of system can we create? All right, what kind of system can we create, or can we amend ourselves to be, so that we basically increase the quality of the conversations that we have, the decisions we make, and the collaborative capabilities of the organization and the learning capabilities of the organization. And that comes down to thinking about, okay, well, what would be the model? What's our goal? And I'll use the model that I'm using in the corporate world for a moment, because I know that, okay, and I've used it somewhat in the intelligence world. But let's just talk about, all right, we're talking about human development. What are we trying to do? We're trying to basically create the environment where people can work on the skills that's going to make them better performers. And what does that mean? That means that people perform best when they come to the table with the right mindset, all right, and they behave in the right way that produces the results. Results come from behaviors. Behaviors come from mindsets. How do we create an environment, a culture that enables a learning mindset like we're talking about and enables learning behaviors? And I think that what it means is that you've got to focus on having people develop a hyper learning mindset with humility is one of the key parts of it. But also, how do I want to behave? How does a person with humility behave? And you should basically create a model which says a person with humility, okay, behaves this way. And the behaviors are observable, granular behaviors that can be measured. And a person without humility behaves this way. And it's observable and it's granular. And you make up, a list, and you create a list, 7 to 10 behaviors, and people basically grade themselves. How am I doing on that behavior? And then they work on improving behaviors. You spend 5 minutes at the end of each meeting, everybody grading the behaviors they're working on. And so it's a behavioral approach to change. And so how does it change? It changes because people have made meaning of, why do I have to basically embrace humility? Why do I have to become a better collaborator? Why do I have to be more open-minded? Why do I have to learn this new way of learning and being? Well, it's because the digital age is going to require it, And if you cannot add value in ways the technology can't add value, you're going to basically be eliminated, so to speak. And so what can I do that's different from the technology? I can think in different ways, all right? I can emotionally engage in different ways. And it's through emotional engagement that I get the highest human performance, whether it's in the office or in the battlefield. Well, how do I make that happen? So I think it's a different model. It's a totally different model to the Industrial Revolution model, where if you think about the Industrial Revolution model, we were looking to train people to do the same thing over and over again efficiently and productively without making mistakes. In the world that we're going to be dealing in, the technology and the advancement of the technology is between the artificial intelligence and the embedding of things into machines and into human bodies. Things are not going to stay the same, all right? Things are not going to stay the same for 10 years that I'm going to be doing the same job or I'm going to be fighting the same way. It's going to be basically a lot of sense and respond and evolve in the sense of battle. And it's that way now for special ops teams. It's almost like what happens in special ops operations is going to be what happens in the dailiness of work in the workplace. And so how do I basically prepare myself? And we've got to basically, a big part of it is that we got to bring into the workplace the findings of the ancient philosophies and neuroscience, which all my work is based on. And we got to start out dealing with inner peace. All right? Then we got to start out dealing with otherness. We all need others. So all life is not competition. It's not me against you, Val, and you against me. It's us against them. All right? And the them is not the people next door to us, or not the people in the next room. Them is the people that basically in your profession that you are concerned about harming us. And it's a change in mentality. It's a change from individualism to teams. It's a change from individualism to, if you will, collective work. It's a measurement of people not only by performance, but by how they behave and how they enable the end result, which is the type of thinking and performance we want. So it is a different model, but the science is clear that the model works. Does that make sense?
It does, and I appreciate that answer. And you mentioned the collective. Who has a question about the collective flow that you touched on earlier in the presentation?
I am. Professor, the question is really about what frameworks, tools, techniques, training procedures would you use or are you familiar with, other than the behavioral markers you just pointed out, to enable collective flow? What's the latest that you've seen in enabling what you call collective flow?
Collective flow has some conditions preceding. Number one, the team has to have basically developed trust. All right. So how do you develop trust? All right. Trust is emotional. Trust is dependent upon how people are treated and how they see you treat other people. And so developing trust, and trust is highly dependent on caring about somebody as a human being, and that's emotional connectedness. So that occurs in conversations and also through emotional training, virtual reality, and being able to manage, if you will, your positive emotions inside of you. Trust is positive emotions are biochemically transmitted between people. And knowing how to manage those emotions and being very sensitive to your emotions and your facial expressions and your eye contact and your wording and the tone you use. 85% of the message of a sentence is tone, all right, and volume. 85%, not the words. Words are only about 15%. So there's plenty of science from the behavioral basis of basically saying, all right, to have collective intelligence, we know we need this type of, we need caring, we need trust, we need people that are good reflective listeners, they're open-minded, they have humility. And you basically, how do I basically develop those skills? And you work together as a team, and you basically, as a team, after each engagement, you define those skills in a granular fashion. You measure those skills in a granular fashion. People are working on skills. Teammates are helping each other and giving each other feedback. It is not competition. And it's an iterative process that builds upon itself, and it works. All right. I work with some companies that I've been working with for 3-4 years, the senior leadership team. And I'm not bragging, this is not ego. I'm trying to basically answer your question and tell you what's possible. Over that 4-year period, say about 2 years, it took about 2 years. Over that 2-year period, we got to really know each other and be able to be totally open, totally comfortable, trust, etc. The senior execs of that company fly in here every quarter, and we meet, we get together, we sit down. The first thing we do is we get around the table and we do a check-in. How's everybody doing? Where's your head today? Where are you emotionally? What's going on inside of you? Then we do a 5-minute meditation. And then we have no agenda. We begin talking because we have developed the behaviors and internally and also as a team. Within 10 to 15 minutes every time, we are in a state of collective flow. And we'll go about 3 hours. And the number of times you hear, that's a wow, where did that come from? It just emerges from people because they have learned how to relate to each other and trust each other. You can do that with your small teams if you do the hard work. And again, it starts with the basics of buying into a behavioral approach. And I'm not trying to sell you a book, but the recent book, Hyperlearning, is a book with a workbook, and it basically has the entire approach I'm talking about in workbook form, and with reflection times and workshops with deliverables to help teams do what you're asking. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense to me, and I'll ask another question, if I may, about the behavioral side of this. I put in the chat that we do have behavioral markers in the military, and we get those from crew resource management, and they're also in team steps and used in commercial aviation. The idea is that teamwork is observable, which you pointed out, you can observe things. But are you basing some of this behavioral marking capability off of what we've learned in team science, or where did you discover this thinking of identifying the right behaviors to move from left to right?
The behaviors come from various disciplines in psychology and also neuroscience, vis-a-vis what's been able to be shown, the emotional side and the neuroscience, which is looking into the subconscious. When I take a behavioral approach, my approach on behaviors is very granular. A behavior that we talk about is humility, all right? Okay, I'll go back. How does a person with humility behave? How do you know I have humility? How does a person without humility behave? And granularly defining that, and so that you basically say, I see this, I see this. By the way, you did this, and this is evidence of non-humility. And I've created diagnostics which basically have put forth the granular behaviors in both ways, which allow people to grade themselves and to take tests. And that's been used by over 3,000 executives. It's been used by, I don't know the number now. It's been used by the Navy Admirals training for quite some time. And Where did that come from? It came from, it's not really science other than it's basically drilling down into the fact, what is the component of being open-minded? How do you define somebody that's open-mindedness, and then researching open-mindedness, but then trying it out? So it's been an iterative, the actual granular defining of behaviors is pretty unique. And science of it is limited by the amount of times that it's been used at this point. Make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate it.
Hi, Dr. Hess. Thanks so much for your talk. You've mentioned a few books already, but I was just wondering if you might be able to elaborate on the research that's been most influential to your thinking on humility. I heard you mention Carol Dweck's Mindset, the findings on flow, some philosophers, but just would be interested in any other recommended readings you can suggest for our faculty and students.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can send Val the bibliography. It's not in the book. My most recent book was based on about 500 academic articles and 185 books. What's the most important, or had the most impact? Well, Barbara Fredrickson's work has had a lot of impact on me, and her book, Positivity and Love 2.0, and her book Love 2.0 is not about romantic love. It's about platonic love, if you will, and it has the best science on how we chemically connect to people to create positive emotions in teams. So Barbara Fredrickson's work is very important. My dear friend Amy Edmondson's work is very important on psychological safety and people feeling safe and speaking up and speaking out. Landmark work. Jane Dutton's work at Michigan is very important on connecting with people. All right, connecting with people. The best listening work has been done out of MIT, the book Dialogue, and the best research on collective intelligence has been done out of MIT and Carnegie Mellon. And I'm spacing off the top of my head the professor's name at MIT that led but the best work on having, we'll call the type conversations that I'm talking about, is by William Isaacs at MIT. The book is called Dialogue. What else can I talk with? The best work on courage is probably done by my good friend Jim Dietert, D-E-T-E-R-T. Humility, Edgar Schein has done some good work on humility. But humility goes all the way back to Carl Rogers. You go back to listening and how people, the philosophy of counseling and effective counseling, Carl Rogers' work, and you go back to Arthur Combs' work in educational psychology, and you go back to Maslow's work, you'll find a lot of work in positive psychology, which confirms what we're looking at. If you go back to the Stoic philosophers and the Buddhist philosophers and the Chinese philosophers, you will see across those philosophies many of the practices which I write about, in which neuroscience is also now validating. Most of the behaviors which I believe, I'm sorry if I have the wrong name, I think it was Brian that had the previous question. Many of the behaviors that I talk about are the same behaviors that are 2,500 years old in philosophy, vis-a-vis that are necessary for human self-management and, if you will, human purpose and human meaning and happiness. And so what my books do is bring together, they synthesize the best science I can find in modern science with the best findings of philosophy, with the best applied science, if you will, of actually putting the stuff in performance in an actionable way inside organizations. Does that help you?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, and I love Fredrickson's work on the broaden and build theory.
Yep.
It's fantastic. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, and it's what I find fascinating, and I hope the gentlemen don't find offensive. So much of the leading edge work done in emotions, the best book on the neuroscience of emotions is about 3 years old. Barrett's her last name. So much of the best work on emotions, fortunately or unfortunately done, it's coincidental to me, is done by women. And that's not surprising because the research overwhelmingly says that the best collaborators are women because women look at collaboration as relational, not transactional. And there's been 8 research studies on collaboration done, on collective intelligence done at Carnegie Mellon, 5 done at MIT and 3 done at Carnegie Mellon. And they all found the same result. And I hope none of the men get offended. It's not intended to offend you. It's just the way we have been wired and trained. And that's just what I'm fixing to say is an opportunity to improve. Is the research shows in solving complex problems or in creativity and innovation, all right, 5-person teams were formed, diverse teams, diverse backgrounds, the variable was gender. The most effective problem-solving teams were teams that had 5 women and no men. The most creative teams were teams that had 5 women and no men. And the research says women look at collaboration, as I said, as relational. Men look at it as transactional. Men look at it more as competition. Women look at it more as a democratic conversation where everybody should be heard and everybody's views should be considered. And, that's coming from MIT and Carnegie Mellon, two world-class engineering schools and computer science schools, talking about collective intelligence and emotions, that says a lot. And again, many times when I say this, men, the back of their necks, the hair stands up. It's sort of like my reaction is relax, relax, relax. Okay, science is the science, and everything is an opportunity to improve. But it's a difference in mindset and approach that's important here, because the emotional aspect of being able to respond to in real time to constantly changing situations that are being created by technology, and technology embedded into machines, and technology embedded into human beings. In order to respond at the highest levels, we're going to have to basically come to grips with the fact that we have to basically ourselves respond in a different way and process differently than we have been trained or wired to respond to linear transactions over a long period of time. The speed of this is going to be so fascinating that people are going to have to be responding at such a quick rate, all right? And it's this type of training, and I know you use video games and everything at your school, but it's, so much of it is going to be like video games, but faster and faster with different variables because of the embedding of technology, not only into machines, but into human beings. And that's coming easily within 10 years.
Thanks, Ed. You gave us a lot to think about in that last bit, and at least for me, confirmed some thoughts and experiences that I've had, both personally and professionally. So,
yeah, sure, Dr. Hess, thanks for being here, and I really appreciate your insight. I'm definitely gaining a lot from that. My context is I'm not sure if you're familiar with Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote Homo Deus, but yeah, right. So I'm drawn to that idea he had, and for those that don't know, this idea of great decoupling, where consciousness and intelligence actually separate. Yeah. And so all of the things that we talk about, I fully grasp the idea of how important our emotions are, but he's fairly pessimistic about about the next step. And one thing he says is that we'll lose our political or our economic and military usefulness. He says there'll be less value placed on humans for those purposes. And to that end, I'm as you can see, perhaps my comment is that you spoke of our trust in positive emotions, ownership, but there's one aspect of that. Obviously, that's not politics. It really is. It's irrational. It's often log rolling and everything else. However, policy is rational, and sense making seems compatible with that. But things like organizational imperatives you're talking about, like collective flow, they're a real challenge to our traditional hierarchies. And there's a reason for that, of course, to control the use of violence. And that makes a lot of sense. But let me just stick it to one question, and I think it probably will address most of those. But how do you think the democratic control of our military will change in the age of AI?
That's a question I've not thought deeply about. So I'm probably the wrong person to answer it. I think, if you will, that the issue is going to be a huge issue. The issue is going to be a huge issue much quicker than we probably think, because some of our, quote, adversaries have a system that's very different than ours, and one such adversary is deeply committed to basically being the leader globally in the use of AI. And so the question comes down to, when you're dealing in that situation, what type of authority people have and for what use things can be used, and what are the limits, and how are those limits going to be determined, as you said, in a democracy. And I don't know the answer to that. I'm not an expert in that question. Let me go back for a moment to Yuval Noah Harari. I too am a fan of his, and Yuval can be pessimistic in some parts of his work, but in other parts of his work, he does hone in on emotions, where he said that basically emotional stability is going to be a key human skill in order for humans to, if you will, deal with the rate of change. In fact, that quote is in the prologue of my new book. And so the emotional component of being able to be in environments that are changing so much, and being able to be adapt and to have the ability to not be threatened by it, to not be scared by it, and to allow oneself to approach it in a way that one can figure it out and figure out how to do, is going to be a key skill, because we humans are going to basically really it's if you really get to the stage where I believe we're going to end up is techno-sapiens, where in 10 years we'll have the capabilities of have technology embedded in ourselves, and in neural nets embedded in our brains, so our brain is talking with computers. There's going to be people that basically can do that well, and people that can't. And what we have to do, especially in a democratic country, is make sure that not only can we protect ourselves, but that we basically have got the right people, if you will, in the military that can basically adapt to be able to perform against adversaries that are going to be able to, because of the different system, to be able to, if you will, create techno-sapiens maybe faster than we do, and or more of them. And so the whole issue of the integration of technology into the human being is going to be, I think, more challenging for us than just the machinery of war being technology advancing, all right, that the embedding of artificial intelligence. I think that is a big issue that our military is going to have to deal with in a democratic country where, at current time, we don't have a lot of consensus about much at all.
Thank you for that. I will close us out with one final question, and I hope it's a softball question for you. What is the number one piece of advice that you give students who are old smart and don't know how to change?
Figure out why you need to change. Before a person can, there's 3 steps to change. A person's got to make meaning of why they should change. Because if you don't make meaning of why to change, you won't change. All right? Change then is a 2-step process. You have to take that why and create the right mindsets which propel you to do the hard work of behavior change. And the science of behavior change is crystal clear. It goes back, so much of it comes from military training. All right? One of the leading cognitive scientists in the country today was my mentor. I was a training scientist that did lots of training with NASA and the Air Force and the Navy. So the science of behavior change and the science of training is all clear about the necessity of, you got to have your why and you got to have your mindset. In order to understand the why, you got to basically go explore what's coming. And you got to basically, so many people are ignorant about what is coming. And the very, very bright people, Nobel laureates, and basically said in recent times that what's coming is coming faster than they expected. A lot of it is coming from a cognitive and emotional viewpoint within the next 10 years. And that's a short time frame for the United States military. It's a very short time for any academic institution, all right, to change. But the fact is it's going to come, and those organizations that adapt and change the fastest are going to be the organizations that are going to be the most successful. And that's just the reality as I see it. Does it mean I'm going to be right? Does it mean I know everything? No. It's just my sense of, for the last 10 years of my life, focusing on, in effect, the question you just asked. And so there's no magic bullet, but there is a way.
Well, I know I'm not alone in thanking you for this really insightful, just about hour of discussion. And I know you've given us all a lot to think about. I know I'm going to go and grab your next book and dive into that. And I'd just like to thank you for your time and all the work that you do for, the next generation out there at UVA and all the people that you mentor. That now includes us. So thank you so much for your time, Ed, and for the thoughts that you've shared with us. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ian to close us out.
All right, man. Thank you very much. Professor Hess, again, as our director said, we greatly appreciate you coming on to the show. We feel we're very lucky to have such a unique guest as part of our series. Certainly for us in the audience, but also for everyone out there in the MCU community and our community of interest who can't be here live. I think they'll still benefit a lot from what was talked about here today. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome back anytime, sir.
Okay. All right. All the best to everybody. All the best. And thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service. Take care.
All right. Thank you very much. You too. And to all of our audience, thank you for listening to this week's Brutecast. Make sure you come back next week when we'll return to our lineup of outstanding Team Krulak non-resident fellows. We'll be joined by Patrick James, who will present on the identity in the shadow of a giant, how the rise of China is changing Taiwan. We'll see you all then. Thank you.
Education is what's important. Training, preparation for the expected. Education, preparation for the unexpected.